Let's say you just laid off a whole bunch of people from Xbox Game Studios. Seemingly, the entirety of the gaming world is pretty mad at you. And after leading so many people on with nostalgia baiting, promising the return of franchises that folks have been holding their breath and waiting for about a decade, and even showing some gameplay footage of said franchises, what's the best way to win people's favor back? Well, the obvious solution is to just do it all again. Only this time, use a more popular IP, perhaps one of the most popular IPs, one nestled safely in many people's nostalgia, and one that people would move heaven and earth for in order to get another game. In the VGC podcast, reporter Andy Robinson said that he heard more recently that pitches are being listened to. This is in relation to bringing back Banjo-Kazooie, the company's excellent N64 platformer, that company being Rare. Banjo-Kazooie still retains a very dedicated fanbase all these years later. And apparently everybody's surprised because the developers are actually eager to see a return to the series. This is notable because for years, Rare was said to be laser focused on new original games, which is why they haven't made a sequel in more than a decade. It's entirely possible that Nuts and Bolts never got a sequel because people didn't want Nuts and Bolts and thus it didn't sell nearly as well as people expected it to. But yeah, maybe the new generation of Rare devs want to stamp their fame on a new IP. Reportedly, former director Greg Mayles, who left the studio after the layoffs, is someone who doesn't look back notoriously. He said this on the record, that he likes to do new stuff. The attitude from the studio leadership was always, no, 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 we're gonna do something new. There are two names that are popping up as the ones reportedly interested in working on this, and both of which had pretty decent recent successes. The first one that's been coming up, and I feel like this has only been coming up because it's what the fans actually want, is Toys for Bob. Now, I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure Toys for Bob started to get really popular with Skylanders, and then once they did the Skylander and Crash remake trilogies, everybody started to kind of view them as the company that would be great to bring things back for some other classic franchises. Think in the same way that Nintendo used Grezzo to bring back Luigi's Mansion and Link's Awakening. Through most of all of this, they were owned by Activision, who obviously was eventually bought out by Microsoft, and I remember around that time everybody started thinking about Toys for Bob as a potential to bring back the Banjo series the same way they bought back Spyro and Crash. Keep in mind, in that same time they had made Crash Bandicoot 4, Crash Team Rumble, and even worked on a few Call of Duty games. So everybody was like, oh yeah, match made in heaven, bring Banjo in, give him to Toys for Bob, they'll do for the Banjo series what they did for Spyro and what they did for Crash. Obviously, that never ended up happening, even though Phil Spencer had reportedly expressed interest in having Toys for Bob revive older game properties. And then with just the giant mess that Microsoft was by 2024, after dealing with a crap ton of layoffs already, they decided to become independent again. Which is why the words of Andy Robinson kind of made sense. He had constantly heard the name that would come up would be Toys for Bob, but now that's not the name that pops up. Because obviously not, they no longer work for Microsoft. Now the one that's coming up is Moon Studios, who obviously famously collaborated with Microsoft to create the Ori games, Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori and the Will of the Wisp, back in 2015 and 2020 respectively. Moon Studios is also interesting because they are founded by Thomas Mailer, I think that's how you pronounce that, and Gennady Korol. I might have messed that one up too. Thomas initially worked at Blizzard Entertainment. He had success with independent games like Castle Crashers, Limbo, and Braid. That success urged him to move on and open his own company. And interestingly enough, the name Moon Studios was actually inspired by the John F. Kennedy quote, "We choose to go to the moon." By 2015, they had released Ori and the Blind Forest, and by 2020, they had expanded significantly, having more than 80 people recruited. And then apparently there was some kind of drama in relation to workspace culture, specifically in the form of oppressive crunch culture, some off-color racist and sexist remarks as well. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if that ever got anywhere. Now, I think it's interesting that Moon Studios comes up as the option for Banjo-Kazooie remake because obviously, while it might not be as cut and dry for many as seeing them remake the Crash and Spyro games, it seems like they definitely do have a talented team if they're able to make the Ori titles. And because they are popular indie games, everybody's all over that kind of stuff. The thing is, at the moment, Moon Studios is kind of smoothing out its early access for its RPG No Rest for the Wicked, and Toys for Bob is actually already confirmed that it's working on another game with Xbox. Many people expect that it's going to be either another Crash title or Spyro game, but given the past, anything is possible. Now, that's kind of the reported stuff. Those are the factual things that we have heard people say. What's my take on all of this? Well, I think it's all a load of horse crap. As much as I would love a new Banjo-Kazooie game, and as much as I would be all for the revival of that series, what kind of optimism do you expect somebody to have for all of this? First off, it seems like they're just kind of making news like this to generate a new wave of hype. Like I said earlier on, they currently are despised by everybody. So if you mention Banjo-Kazooie, something that's like loved by everybody, at least the older gamers, all of a sudden, all of this bad news kind of makes people intrigued and be like, maybe there's hope. Give out some big headlines, some talking points, anything to distract everybody of what you just did. That being the massive layoffs and all of the cancellations. Not to mention, you just laid off somebody at Rare that was working on the original Banjo games. So excuse me if I'm a little bit skeptical by this news and I don't quite believe it's going to amount to anything. And then it gets even worse. Since you know that Banjo is owned by Microsoft, he's a Microsoft IP. Well, that means that even if they do start to work on Banjo, number one, it feels like it would be a very long time until we actually see something on screen. The earliest of trailers, earliest of announcements even. Actually, knowing Microsoft, the announcement would come pretty quickly and it would be like 7 years before release, if that. But the problem is, since this is an IP that's owned by Microsoft, why would I have any confidence that would actually make it through to release? Not with all of the recent stuff going on. Why would I get hyped about another game made by Rare? In 2025, we have seen Everwild, canceled. Perfect Dark, canceled. ZeniMax Studios' online MMORPG game, canceled. These were things that people were very hyped about. Massive titles. These were headliners. And if they didn't survive, why would I even assume that there's a chance that Banjo-Kazooie could make it through? Especially with Greg Miles leaving. Mind you, Everwild was first announced in November of 2019. And to be fair, I imagine many people already had suspicions that something was going to happen because there was no sign of Everwild at Xbox's Summer Game Fest. But Perfect Dark, they featured as early as June 2024's Xbox Showcase. That one was a much bigger surprise, and it just gives you less and less confidence about what's to come with various Xbox IPs. Specifically these niche ones, the non-guaranteed moneymaker big ones, like Call of Duty. And then let's say Banjo actually gets announced. Let's say it gets developed. Let's say they show off various gameplay footage for Banjo. Let's say the gameplay footage looks really good and the hype actually starts to generate. Well, again, using Perfect Dark as an example, apparently what was shown in the showcase that got everybody so hyped for Perfect Dark in the first place was a fun little charade to show that the game was a lot further along developed than it actually was. Now, in fairness, this was a vertical slice. It was clearly the engine and a working area of the game, and I believe the developer of this trailer actually responded to this criticism and clarified that. It's kind of like an early E3 demo that people get their hands on that are completely threadbare compared to what's actually released, which is very normal. But at the same time, what kind of confidence would I have at this point if I was to see Banjo-Kazooie looking really great, and then all of a sudden by the time I get to the actual game, either one or two things could very clearly happen because they've happened in the past. Number one, it could turn out that the game was severely underdeveloped and needed a lot more time, and it was just rushed out the door because Xbox gave some kind of realistic time limit and just wanted things out for Game Pass or whatever. Or number two, the game could take an entire shift and not be a proper Banjo-Kazooie title. It's been so long since the last Banjo game. And that was Nuts and Bolts. And need I remind you, when Nuts and Bolts was first announced, everybody was very excited for it before they decided to do a complete 180 on the type of game that it was. So unless you're gonna hire the ukulele team, I don't know. I have very little faith in anything of this coming to fruition. Even if they hired the ukulele team, I still don't know that they would make it through to the end of the release of that game without getting laid off. Anyway, yeah, I expect more news like this to come out where Xbox is reportedly working on this or reportedly hiring someone to take care of that. And I think especially over the course of the next couple of weeks after all of this negativity that we've had last week, there's just going to be more and more breaking news coming out about all of the great things that Xbox is allegedly working on. Just keep in mind that a couple weeks ago, they were the best thing in the world because they were announcing a partnership with AMD and showing off their Xbox ROG Ally X. And everybody was just like waving their big Microsoft flag. And then, bam, 9,000 people get fired from Microsoft. Or laid off, rather. I don't know. Look, it's complicated because I actually do like the idea of Xbox. I've always liked the idea of Microsoft and what they could potentially achieve. But then it's like, they make a Halo game and it's incomplete, and then a year and a half after it comes out, it's great. I can only pat them on the back so much for bringing games to PC and throwing Gears of War on PlayStation. Like, that's cool, fine. But then, like they go and raise prices on stuff that's not even selling well, make promises of a handheld, and then instead just go throw their name on Asus's handheld. Like, the difference between, let's say, Nintendo and Microsoft, for me at least, as a Nintendo fan and a former Xbox guy. With Nintendo, my issues are strictly what's going on behind the scenes. For all intents and purposes, the Switch 2 and the games and all of that stuff, that's what I want from Nintendo. I just don't want the abhorrent prices that are behind them, and in particular, all of the nickel and diming related to the stuff that should effectively be free and come with the console, like the upgrade packs and welcome tour, and the fact that they don't drop the price on the previous generation stuff. Like, it's all on the outside. Even the Switch 2, I see this thing with a bad screen and everybody's complaining about the inferior hardware, and I'm like, yeah, that's a Nintendo console. That's what you're supposed to do. People are supposed to look at us and laugh at you playing a Nintendo console, and meanwhile, we're just like, wee, Mario Kart. But at the same time, we're supposed to also not be paying PS5 prices for the console. But at the end of the day, the Switch 2 is clearly a Nintendo device, with all of its inferiority. But with Xbox, when I pick up a game, I don't know if I'm going to have a good time anymore. There are a few here and there that slip between the cracks, but every time I get hyped for something, it's just either underwhelming, or after I play it for a few hours, it's no longer fun anymore. I don't know, maybe I'm still way too burnt about how bad the launch of Halo Infinite was, and I just haven't gotten over it yet. They keep buying out studios, and eventually there's going to be a big game that comes out, and it's going to be like, oh my god, Xbox did something phenomenal. At least that's kind of what I've been expecting for a few years now. But they still haven't gotten it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they still haven't released a game where it's just kind of like, everybody's got to put everything down and play this now. And I don't know if they're ever going to get to that point again. It just feels like Xbox fans have been burned with too much hope and false promises way too many times. And when we see a company in front of us that clearly does not know exactly which trajectory they want to go when it comes to the Xbox, it's hard as a fan to know what to feel and how to feel with what's coming for Xbox. But yeah, I don't think Banjo and Kazooie is going to be getting a new game anytime soon, if ever. I'm just happy that I have the OG games on Rare Replay and that he made it to Smash Bros. That's good enough for me. In any case, I think that's all I really got for right now. Thank you so much for listening. I will catch you on the next one.